Infrastructure, we went back to it. If you remember, we explored big data, we explored the economics of IT, but it was really about efficiency, resiliency, agility, and responsiveness. I mean, that's why it all matters. Yes, it makes us superheroes in our organizations to bring infrastructure up to the top, but it's really about these four things: efficiency, resiliency, agility, and responsiveness. So what we really want to do is wrap up our discussion of really with a pragmatic illustration of what you can take back to your offices of another compelling case study by Kevin Barber, Associate Director, Medication Management Center, College of Pharmacy at University of Arizona. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Good morning. I'm happy to be here. As she mentioned, I'm Kevin Barber, the Associate Director of the Medication Management Center at the College of Pharmacy, University of Arizona. And just a little bit about me, I've been in the IT business for over 35 years. I've done just about everything. In fact, even though I am a Z virgin, or at least was recently, I started out on a 360/30 writing assembler language. So that back in the mid-70s for a bank. So what we've developed at the College of Pharmacy, first of all, is one of the top schools in the country. We train lots of pharmacists, as you might imagine. We've got several different programs, and we do a lot of research in pharmaceuticals and in drug usage. And so we have a lot of expertise, and we have a lot of, obviously, lots of pharmacists. So about 7 years ago, the college decided that, with this Part D medication management process, Part D, government basically sponsoring Medicare drug program, that there needed to be a role for the pharmacist in that process. So we created basically a first of its kind pharmacist-run call center, manned and staffed by pharmacists, and of course enabled by IT to facilitate the process. And that's really what I want to speak about here a little bit. The process, we've had a tremendous growth. We started out 7 years ago running this application that was built on a Windows PC that quickly evolved through various stages until last year we put in the Z, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But so the growth has been phenomenal. We have migrated, the application, rewritten the application multiple times in order to do that. And our business problem, of course, is, growth. We've found a hot spot. We've got lots of plans, lots of customers lined up to use our process. In fact, we turn people away. We don't really go out and market the product, or at least we haven't in the past, because we've had so much interest in it. And from a processing point of view, as you can imagine, one of the big things that we do is every customer that we have, every patient's data that we get as much data as we can. We get all their pharmacy claims. We get any other medication information that we can get from the various plans. So we get lab data, we get diagnosis data, we get hospital visits, we get all kinds of things. Then we call the patient and we find out even more. Oh, I'm not really taking that med. Oh, I'm taking this over-the-counter med. Oh, I had to go to I went and got a $4 fill at Walgreens because it was cheaper and I didn't have to use my health plan, therefore you're not seeing that claim. So we basically get as much data as we can, and we're constantly, every time that patient's data changes, we're reanalyzing their profile. What has changed in their profile, and what kind of recommendations do we need to make for them? What have we learned from this process? What conditions do they have? What kind of, are they having a compliance issue, for instance? Are they, should they be really taking maybe an ACE or an ARB because they've got a heart condition? Or, so we're not looking just for cost savings, which we of course also look for. We want to, if somebody's using a brand, we'll suggest a generic, especially since it's going to be lower cost for them, especially if you're retired. But we're also looking for every other possibility in that process. Sometimes we're adding medications, sometimes we're taking away medications, sometimes we're recommending let's reduce this medication or let's give a little bit more. So the analysis system we built does that, creates those recommendations that analysis, and as I said, we're doing that in real time. So every time the data changes, we're rerunning it. So we've got a high use for CPU, we've got a growing database. We've been running this all on MySQL, PHP for the last 5 or 6 years. We are in the process of migrating that to DB2 now. So my biggest problem, of course, here, as I point out, is that it's I/O, and it's being able to handle the extreme volumes and the extreme growth. This doesn't even really show what will be next year, which will be probably more in the range of 15 million members. Okay, so again, we wrote this application called RX Companion that does a bunch of things, and I already mentioned the main thing, the analyzing the data, looking for intervention opportunities. Pharmacists can't prescribe medications, but they can talk to patients and they can talk to doctors. And so that's really what this process is all about, is we talk to the patients, we learn as much as we can about them, we make recommendations to those patients, we document that, we send that information back to the plans so that they have a better understanding of what we've learned, and we then also communicate directly to the doctor saying, we've talked to your patient, we recommend that you do this. We recommend that they stop taking this medication, that we start taking this medication. And then, of course, we document all that process. We send out letters to the patients with kind of reminders of what we talked about. In some cases, we talk to the same patients 4 and 5 years every year, or multiple times during the year, depending on how sick they are. And so we have a very detailed history of what we've talked to the patient about in the past. And we keep track of all that. And then a very important piece of what we do is we track the outcome. How successful were we in changing the patient's behavior? And so, you know, if we did recommend a new medication, did they actually make the change? If they're having a compliance issue, they're not taking their meds all the time because it's too expensive, or they feel good today, so I'm not going to take my meds, that's usually when a patient gets into trouble, right? That's one of the biggest concerns in healthcare is a patient taking the meds they should be taking? So we have to try to change their behavior, and we're doing that based on the analytics, but we're also doing it based on our expertise in talking to patients. One of the advantages, of course, that we have is that we're a college of pharmacy. So we can do research on what we've already learned, and we have the ability to use pharmacy students at various levels during the process in engaging the patients as well. So it's a great win-win for the university, teaching pharmacists how to actually do something other than count pills. Okay, so a year and a half ago, I was running my whole system on an Apple Mac Pro. This is always an interesting part of the story. How did I do that? Well, it was pretty amazing. But how did we continue to do that was even more amazing. We decided that we were running out of gas. We knew we were going to get a lot more customers. We're, you know, like I said, we've been turning away customers. We've been not really marketing the product. But people were finding out about us, so we had people basically beating down our door saying, I want your service. So I know I needed a scalable solution, and we looked at a number of solutions to do that. We eventually obviously settled on the Z, and for a couple of interesting reasons. We did a POC with IBM at Poughkeepsie, and we were hoping, obviously, and expecting to get some performance benefit. We got huge performance benefits. And of course, the x86 platforms generally don't have the I/O capabilities that a Z does, or that a mainframe does. And that was, of course, a big win for us. So we ended up being recommended, well, let's basically start with a baby, the Z114. Originally it was, we really only need one IFL. Well, you can't just have one IFL. You probably should have at least 2 for some redundancy. And then, of course, IBM, the godfather, made us an offer we couldn't refuse. So we ended up with a 4 IFL machine at a good price. And we've been very happy with that. It's just like anything else. You get a little more horsepower, you end up using it. And believe me, I've used it. So what happened? When we migrated to the Z about a year ago, we, of course, did some testing. And again, at that point, I'm using MySQL, remember. We copied our data over to the Z. We brought up Linuxes. We tested all that. And then one weekend, and actually it was Thanksgiving weekend last year, we started running in production, and we haven't looked back. It was basically that simple. I have a part-time Linux administrator was doing our few small processes that we had, and he learned a little bit about VM, and Linux is Linux. We brought up a bunch of Linuxes very quickly and easily, and we were off and running. And the first weekend, we were getting data load times reduced by 1/3. The business rule process, that analytics I was talking about, processes were reduced by 60% the first day, and that was without any changes to the application. And then the batch update processes were reduced 94%, and that was a huge win for us. So I was to the point where I was running my analytics all weekend long, just so that I could catch up for the next week. Now I run those as the data comes in, and I run it whether we're running Apache during the day while patients are being talked to, has no effect on my overall processing. So it's been great, it's been non-disruptive. And obviously we're positioned now well for future growth. One of the things that I like to say about the benefit is that I don't want to be in the business of managing hardware and software. I want to be in the business of changing my application to support our patients. I don't want my team of developers to be constantly rewriting the application to get a little more performance out of it or to adapt to some piece of hardware or some piece of software. They need to be basically developing something that has value to our patients and to our call center so that we can do more with what we've got. Recently we won the Pinnacle Award, which is by the American Association of Pharmacists, as the premier medication therapy management process in the country. So, what did I get? Well, what I wanted when I started out this process was I wanted what I've told IBM was almost infinite scalability. And of course, they cringe when I say that, but very extreme levels of scalability. I'm still at the bottom end of the Z, but I've got an environment now that I can grow without having to do a lot of management or changes to my application. As I already mentioned, low administrative overhead. I'm still using a part-time Linux administrator to manage the Linuxes and the rest of the environment, VM, on our Z box. Stability. That machine has been running. We put it in last year. As I said, it was installed in September. We ran it in production in November. It has not been turned off. It hasn't restarted. We haven't, VM has been running since then. We've restarted some of the Linuxes since then, but the machine itself has not failed once. And of course, I wouldn't have been able to do this if it wasn't really affordable. It may not be the cheapest solution, but it's a very affordable solution for us. So what are we going to do in the future? Well, I already said I've got huge growth, so my next couple years are going to be devoted to being basically managing, triple-digit growth. We expect to be, well, next year we will be the largest MTM service provider in the country, and it's only going to grow from that. We are going to start doing a lot more heavy analytics. As I said, the core part of our business is running these rules, figuring out what we should be telling our patients. We want to get obviously better at that, and we want to do more of that as time goes on. So we want to touch more lives, and we want to be able to target more of those very specific things to the patients. And one of the other big things I want to do is we're running tens of millions of transactions, these batch analytic processes, which we're running online, but I consider batch. I need to have a better way of managing those, being able to distribute those across multiple processors and wherever that hardware is that exists in my environment. So I need to be able to use the data that's being generated from the transactions itself to help manage that process. So we're looking into changing our environment to basically help it manage itself. And IBM would be happy to hear we're considering getting a redundant or backup box at a remote location so we can have kind of constant availability. So thank you.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic.